Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about reducing and removing our misunderstandings, and in a way to a large degree implicitly and specifically explicitly, getting better with communication. And when it's said that our thoughts create our reality, we need to look at the words that create the thoughts. Because it is those very thoughts communicated and expressed through words via words that forms our belief systems. The belief systems that forms our mindset at the subconscious levels. Just like the set of cards or just like the set of bricks, when placed together they form a wall. Exactly in the similar manner, it is these belief systems placed one brick at a time, using one thought, one word at a time, functioning below the level of conscious awareness, that in a way shapes our reality and can become the fate of our reality as well. Now, just as a request, you may want to, or you may choose to want to, listen to all of that once again. So our thoughts and our words and our feelings kind of on some degrees merge together, enabling us to communicate more effectively, more efficiently, more impactfully, or disabling us to be less efficient, to be less effective, and less impactful with our communication. And since most of our issues or most of our troubles or most of our anguish arise because of the communication gap, arise because of the misunderstandings with regards to communications, arise with regards to the ineffectiveness, our inefficiency to be able to communicate effectively, it quite logically and quite naturally, quite organically, then should probe us to look at the words, to understand the words, to communicate our thoughts and our feelings, and thereby its meaning more impactfully, more efficiently, and more diligently. So many a times we're not even aware of the subconscious belief systems that are operating within us, which are impacting our choice-making, our decision-making skills. And these are the belief systems with regards to the usage of the words and the meaning of the words that we have inherited from others, that we have inherited from our grown-ups, that we have inherited from our family, that we have inherited from our society, that we have inherited from our culture, that we have inherited from our religion, that we have inherited from our educational system. And none of us are left unimpacted and uninfluenced by all of that, by a combination of all of those factors. To ask, to reflect as to what is the true meaning, what is the real meaning of this word, which has given birth to this thought and thereby has made or structured this belief system. इस शब्द का असल मतलब क्या है, इस शब्द का असल अर्थ क्या है, जिसके हिसाब से, जिसके बिना पे ये विचार आया है, एंड इस विचार की वजह से ये बिलीफ सिस्टम बनता चला गया है. The belief system that is hidden under the level of conscious awareness and yet is operating and making choices with regards to 95 to 97 and 98% of the decisions, of the choices we make in our lives or that we do not make in our lives, for ourselves. And in order to understand that, explicitly, I'll be taking up two different words and then two extra words, two more words to help us understand, to help us reflect if we have misunderstood the meanings of the words and thereby misinterpreted the thoughts with regards to the usage of those words and thereby miscommunicated and misrepresented the word, but it has also structured the belief system that may not have been very helpful, that may have been misinformed and thereby misdirected as well. So the two words that I'll explicitly use here are responsible and nice. And I'll then take up two more words, two extra words, explicitly to help us understand, to help us realize how we have been misinformed and thereby probably miscommunicating, have not only formed and framed a misinformed belief system, but have also miscommunicated and thereby have mostly been misunderstood. And quite naturally, quite organically, quite logically, quite mindfully, if we need to get better with our relationships with ourselves and with the others, we naturally need to get better with the art of communication, which naturally requires, at least to some degree, if not completely, the usage of appropriate words. And the usage of the appropriate words quite naturally comes in when we really understand the meaning of the words itself. Because only when we begin to understand the meanings of the words differently and start using them differently, can we start to get a different response. So the two words, like I mentioned earlier, that I'll be wanting to use today, that I'm choosing to use today, are responsible and nice. And the two other words, with regards to these words, which many a times have been miscommunicated and thereby misunderstood, are obligation and kind. So if you look at the first word, responsible, just like the way we were taught in schools with regards to Varnavichhed, with regards to the breaking of the word, to not just pronounce it properly, to not just pronounce it appropriately, but also to understand it properly, would go something like this, wherein the teacher would say, or wherein the grown-up who was giving the instructions would say, if you were to divide the word responsible, how many syllables would you get out of it? Now, quite naturally, it comes into two words, response and able. And in a way, it then implicitly tells us about our ability to respond, which then in a very subtle way also tells us that when we are talking about our ability to respond, how much, how little, and somewhere in the middle, are talking about three levels of choices and everything in between those levels of choices. So now let's apply mathematics here. If responsible equals to response able, your ability to respond that comes within this range of choices, it naturally entails freedom, because it is only when we are free can we make choices, or it is only when we are free that choices come into the picture, or the other way around, that when we are choosing, we are only choosing because we are free. Otherwise, there is no choice, and when there is no choice, there is no freedom. So now correlating the mathematical aspect with the English vocabulary, with the English usage of the words, it quite naturally means that responsibility, or our ability to respond with the spectrum of choices given how much, how little, or how much in between, or the range that is available, comes with the freedom to choose and make decisions, invariably implying that responsibility equals freedom to choose, thereby also implying that responsibility is freedom. Now, many a times, unfortunately, the word responsibility gets miscommunicated and misinterpreted and misused, or incorrectly used and inappropriately used with the word obligations. Now, obligations comes with the usage of a lot of shoulds and have to and ought to and must do, invariably implying that there aren't choices here. If you should do this, and if you can't question why, or if you can't say, can I do it a little differently? Is there a different way of doing and thinking things? Well, it naturally doesn't come with choices. And once you don't have choices, you cannot be held accountable and responsible for the things that you don't choose, for the things that are pushed onto you, but you've not chosen them yourself. So in a way, responsibility is intrinsically driven, is driven through the internal motivations, whereas obligations are externally driven, are externally put upon us, and they both have a rightful place. So just to put it into another context, I'd like to cite an example. I'd like to share this with an example. Now, say supposedly, let's assume that somebody is wanting to break through the front door of my house, of my home. While I'm recording this video, I may choose to respond, to shut off this video immediately, to run towards the front door, to be able to see who's trying to break in through the door. Probably also checking if the door is locked from the inside. Then probably running to the balcony to cry out for help, to shout out for help. The other thing that I can do is, I can try and call up somebody from my phone, while at the same time running towards the balcony door and locking the balcony door from the outside. The third response that I can take up is, call up a security watchman, or call up a neighbor to be able to ask for help. The other response that I can also have is just go running to the front door, open up the latch from the inside, open the door so that the person who's trying to break in gets into the shock mode itself first, and then I start to shout, or even push the person aside and run out from my house. What I can also do is lock myself inside this particular room and shout out for help or call somebody else for help. The other response that is also possible is for me to wait inside my own house, my own home, holding a stick or holding on to something which is hard enough to hit the person as soon as the person tries to break in, or as soon as the person has broken in, and hit the person with this hard object to be able to defend myself. I can get into the flight response wherein I'm trying to escape the person, running away or trying to escape the situation. I can get into the fight response, which is trying to fight this person who's trying to break in. Or I can get into the freeze response, wherein I get into a frozen state, wherein I'm inactive and not moving and not doing anything till the situation calms itself out. And I can keep switching between these three responses till the time I begin to feel safe, till the time safety is established. Now, when I'm talking about safety over here, I'm talking about both the physical safety and the psychological safety. Now, in this situation, or in a situation where somebody feels attacked and they unfortunately happen to hurt or even to kill the person, it still comes under an act of self-defense, a response to defend one's own self, a response to defend, to protect one's own safety, both physical and psychological, and thereby it's never considered a criminal offense unless proven guilty, unless proven otherwise. And if we look into those examples, we'll realize that even in such situations, we are always having a choice, and we are choosing our choices given the circumstances, and those choices can change till the time the situation persists, till the time that circumstance persists and is present. But we still are having the freedom to choose out of those three choices. But when it comes to obligation, I am morally obliged not to kill anybody or not to hurt anybody, just out of my free will or fancy, just out of my mood to hurt somebody or to kill somebody. It's a moral obligation on me as a citizen of the world, as a citizen of this country, to not do that, to not indulge in any such activity, just because out of my whims and fancies and my mood to do so. And that is why moral obligation will always be used with should. You should not kill anybody out of your whims, fancies, or moods. You should not be breaking the traffic rules or the orderliness of the traffic, unless, of course, there's an emergency situation that calls for a different response that calls for your flexibility and thereby your ability to respond appropriately. Which would then also entail that if you're having to rush to a hospital for an emergency situation, or if there's a fire around wherein the fire brigade needs to run, their responsibility then becomes to keep sounding the alarms and the horns so that others who are on the road become aware that there is an emergency situation for which one needs to rush in, and probably at that point in time, breaking a traffic signal is not a criminal offense. And if we do not understand that, we kind of get mixed up between responsibility, our flexible ability to respond, and between obligations, which then gets inappropriately communicated and which then forms an inappropriate, misunderstood and miscommunicated belief system. And unfortunately or fortunately, whether we like it or we don't like it, since many a times both these words have been miscommunicated, they have framed a misinformed belief system, which most of us learnt through the others. And that is something that we even pass on to the next generation, pass on to others as well. And then we wonder as to why do we need to learn the art of communication, or we wonder as to why so many people do not understand us. We wonder that why are we misunderstood so many times. We wonder, हमको कोई समझता क्यों नहीं है? There is nobody who understands us, because on the belief system level, on the subconscious level, we all, or at least most of us, have been misinformed. Likewise with the other word, nice or niceness, which in a way gets confused with kindness. Now, of course, to some degree they correlate. Now, of course, to some degree they overlap. But on a very explicit level, niceness is about wanting to project to the outside world how nice of a person you are. It's driven by the assumption that I should be nice because that is how people will like me. That is how people would like to be associated with me. And in trying to be nice most of the times, we forget the concept of boundaries. We forget the concept of personal preferences. We forget the concept of respecting somebody else's personal preference. We at times can be a little bit inconsiderate towards ourselves and towards others. We at times, in order to be perceived as nice people or a nice person, will put up a fake facade, will even be dishonest to a degree, will project our shoulds, will impose our shoulds onto somebody else. As simply as when a lot of people say, oh, you should be doing this, you should be going out over here, you should be going to this wedding, or you should be going to this relative's place, otherwise what will they think about you? Otherwise what will they think about us? Otherwise they will think that we are rude people, we are inconsiderate people. Otherwise they'll have negative opinions about you, and therefore you should be doing those things. Well, that is trying to play nice, trying to play likable. And on a very implicit level, it runs from a lot of anxiety. It functions through anxiety if it's happening on most days. However, being kind is a different ballgame altogether. Being kind also means being able to state your preferences pretty clearly, being able to appreciate and accept somebody else's preferences also as clearly. Kindness naturally comes in with empathy and with compassion, both for one's own self and for others. Kindness also comes with the understanding that people do make mistakes, and that we all make mistakes most of the times, and that's human to do so. It's human to err, and it's also human to learn from those errors, to learn from those errors. Kindness also comes with genuine forgiveness, which niceness may not necessarily come with. Niceness comes with sympathy, and kindness comes with empathy. Kindness demands honesty, which of course can be stated nicely without being rude. But niceness does not necessarily include honesty. For we may nicely entertain a few people, we may nicely help some people, but still hold grudges and resentment against them, but still not talk nicely about them behind their backs. And of course, there are many layers to it, which forms our belief on the subconscious level. So maybe in another video, I would definitely like to talk about the difference between niceness and kindness and the impact of that on our subconscious and how that subconscious then becomes our operating system, dictating and directing 95 to 97 to 98% of our choices and our decisions, which we are not even consciously aware of. For we are not even consciously aware of the meanings of the words that we are using to communicate. And unfortunately, since we have misinformed information about it, we quite naturally, quite logically feel misunderstood, and then we wonder and we scratch our heads wondering, I communicated well, I used the right words, and why am I still misunderstood? Why do I feel still misunderstood? And it has not only framed and formed a misinformed belief system, but it has also confused, it has messed up, it has skewed our intrinsic motivators and our extrinsic motivators, our internal motivation drive that we are drawn towards, that we are excited about, that we want to take responsibility and accountability for, and those that come from the external sources, from our families, from our friends, from our cultural beliefs, from our culture, from our religion, from our educational institutions, and everything else that is extrinsic to us, everything that is outside of us. And logically and quite consciously, since we all realize, since we all understand that many a times the external factors are something that we can't control. Unfortunately, when we don't have the clarity with regards to the words and their meanings, and thereby the belief systems that they form on the subconscious level, we kind of even get mixed up and messed up with regards to understanding our own internal motivations and the external motivators. And quite naturally, if we are confused over there, quite naturally, if we find ourselves a little conflicted over there, it's quite difficult to take charge, to be in charge, to be responsible and accountable for either of those. So let's try and first get aware, pay attention to the words that we use, get aware of the words that we use to communicate our thoughts, which have formed and informed our belief system, and rather than blindly following them, let's try and at least understand that despite our own thinking that we have communicated well, why many a times we feel misunderstood. For our answers just might give us the proper direction if you're curious enough to inquire, if you're curious enough to observe, if you're curious enough to understand. Let's try and do that for ourselves so that we understand our own belief systems a little better, so that we can change our belief systems if we choose to do them, if we choose to be responsible towards them, if we choose to be kind towards them and towards ourselves invariably. Let's try and think about that. Let's try and do that for ourselves. And I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.